Stalking Senefelder, The Early History of Lithography. My first introduction to Alois Senefelder and the early history of lithography came from a course I took at the University of Virginia's Rare Book School under Michael Twyman from the University of Reading in England. Twyman published this important work, A History of Chromolithography, which surveys much of 19th century printing, particularly the color works in the latter half of the 19th century. Senefelder was educated in Munich, Germany, and won a scholarship to study law at Ingolstadt, north of Munich. A couple years into his course of study, following the death of his father, Senefelder left law school to support his mother and 8 siblings. His father was an actor, so he attempted to follow in his footsteps, writing and producing a play called Maidenkenner, or Connoisseur of Women. He thought this would be a financial success, but he basically broke even. In an effort to publish his plays, Senefelder experimented with printing, initially attempting etching on different metals, and then adapting a special greasy ink for drawing on slabs of limestone available locally. After the drawing was completed, he applied an acid solution to etch the drawing in relief, and then used a grease-based ink to apply to the surface of the stone so that he was printing it essentially in relief like a woodcut. Senefelder initially worked with sheet music for a publisher from Vienna who owned the rights to printing the works by Mozart. The process of putting the design on a stone took a great deal of time. In an effort to transfer a previously engraved sheet of music to a polished stone, Senefelder discovered that if he dampened the printed sheet of music, he was able to apply a fresh layer of greasy ink to the previously printed areas of the image. This ink sheet of paper could then be placed over the stone and run through the press to transfer the fresh image, wrong reading now, to the stone. With this insight, Senefelder discovered the principles of lithography as a planographic process, based on the principle that grease and water do not mix. The greasy drawing on the stone is then chemically processed with a mildly acidified gum arabic, allowing the image to be printed from a dampened stone. From 1801 to 1803, Senefelder secured patents in Munich, London, Paris, and Vienna. While lithography grew over the course of the 19th century to replace intaglio processes and the publication of many pictorial images, its major growth took place in France as a result of the enthusiasm that Napoleon had for this new method. Shortly after taking his patent out in London and working with a printer there, this publication, Specimens of Polyautography, was produced, which included a lithograph by the American artist Benjamin West. You can see that this early lithograph used a pen and ink method so that it tended to emulate the line work of etching, which is the predominant print method of that period for pictorial work. It took Senefelder 2 decades after discovering the principles of lithography to publish his text, A Complete Course in Lithography. During those 2 decades, he refined and developed his methods and conceived of ways in which the principles of lithography could be printed from metal on various surfaces, textiles, and paper, and so forth. From the English edition shown here is a frontispiece with a classically attired woman at the press visited by an angel of lithography. It's really the stones from Bavaria that make lithography possible. And in the upper left shows various geological periods, and the Theseus C and the sort of crutch of Africa and Eurasia here is where there were many marshes where crustaceous creatures and so forth died and settled to the floor of the sea, forming the sedimentary rock that created the lithographic limestones. On the upper right is a map showing the areas where the quarries took place, and in the lower left is the Archaeopteryx, the famous fossil that made the Solnhofen quarries legendary in the geological histories. So here from the early 20th century, we see photographs of quarry workers at Solnhofen, north of Munich, Germany, which had been quarried dating back to the Roman era. And in the lower left are the graining rooms where principally women did the finishing preparations on the stones. If you go to the Solnhofen quarries today, you might meet Marcus Vogg, the Solnhofen stone group Steinmeister, stone master, who gave us a tour of the facilities, showing us various stones, including the ones behind him on the right, that have been quarried in the early 20th century and still remain available for artists to purchase and use. I should note here that I created the Graining Sinks of the World website on Flickr. If you Google that, you can see various graining sinks from all over the world for the surface preparation of lithographic stones. Now, one of the big challenges after lithography was introduced was educating artists on the use of lithographic drawing tools and materials. And there were several publications in the 1820s. This is one by Charles Holmendel, The Art of Drawing on Stone, giving a full explanation of the various styles of the different methods to be employed to ensure success, and of the modes of correcting, as well as the several causes of failure, from 1824. So here are a few plates from Holmendel's book. On the upper left shows lithographic pencils and various other tools and their holders, the angle at which one should hold the pencil when drawing, areas of shading and building up tone. The plate on the right shows different technical errors, from greasy fingerprints in the sky to sneeze marks as white flecks in the middle of the image, to even encouraging personal hygiene because dandruff could lead to greasy spots on your drawn image. Holmendel published this alphabet book in 1831 from A to Z, showed lovely pictorial scenes, and was used to promote the artistic potential of the medium. One of the most famous early investigations of lithography was by the Spanish court painter and artist Francisco Goya, who created a series of lithographs showing scenes of bullfighting in Bordeaux, France. His printer was equivalent to the corner copy shop stationary printer who worked with Goya to produce these prints. And they're innovative because of the ways in which he drew on the stone, the kinds of materials he used, including scratching from and into the stone to make highlights and so forth. Here are two of the main forms of printing presses used in the 19th century. In the upper section is a French press, which has a pressure bar which clamps down onto the stone. Pressure is delivered by the press operator standing on a board, and then the stone and press bed are drawn through under pressure with a star wheel attached to typically leather belts to the press bed. In the lower section is a cast iron metal press of English design, similar to the ones used in America as well. This photograph shows a offset press with an automatic inking system used for printing directly from stone. The press operator stands on the upper section with the paper that rolls through this press. This press system actually allows mechanical inking of the stone, and the press operator could print 300 or more impressions in an hour. Here we see a Heidelberg offset press and the principles of the process with inking rollers, water rollers, the plate cylinder, the offset cylinder, and the impression cylinder as paper passes through it. So in Berlin, Germany, there is in East Berlin a square called Senefelder Plot, and there's a statue of Senefelder, and I want to point out the cherubs at the bottom who have inscribed his name in reverse reading, because of course he's a printmaker, and the drawing on the stone is traditionally wrong reading to produce the right reading print. But if you want to find Senefelder, if you're stalking Senefelder, you really need to go to Munich, Germany. And there's a young artist named Franz Hacke who has established Steindruck Munich, which is a print shop that works to preserve the traditions of stone lithography. He has a series of German Krauss presses and various other facilities that host artists in residence. It's at the Kunsler House there, the art house in central Munich. He also hosts a conference every few years where lithography enthusiasts gather to trade stories and methods and so forth. Franz directed me to the State Museum of Graphic Arts, shown here, which has a beautiful collection of plaster copies of Greek and Roman statuary. But there I was able to see a number of prints. It's the second largest print collection in Germany after the Kupferstichkabinett in Berlin. And this is one example of an early print by Senefelder. You can see that Senefelder, who was not trained as an artist, wasn't particularly talented as a draftsman, but I think this print is interesting because he's using early methods of what they called the chalk method or pencil method, as opposed to the pen and ink method, which tended to predominate during that time. And this print is dated around 1800. A really interesting and fascinating place where you can see the evidence of the history of lithography is the State Office for Digitization, Broadband, and Surveying for the state of Bavaria. And there downstairs they have what's called the steinkeller, or sort of stone cellar, with over 26,000 lithographic stones, each measuring 53 centimeters by 53 centimeters, showing every square meter of Bavaria. And the stones have been archived there, so in principle they can be pulled out and printed from again. Here we see a special dolly used to move and transport the stones. And upstairs, above the steinkeller, there's a little working print shop, and through one of the glass cases they have a portrait of Alois Senefelder, here of course wrong reading, on a lithographic stone. In Munich there is a special vocational school named in honor of Alois Senefelder, and the final stop on this effort to stalk Alois Senefelder is to visit his burial plot. He was buried in one of the central cemeteries in Munich on the 26th of February, 1834. So this provides a brief insight into the life of Alois Senefelder, the inventor of lithography, and my stalking of his history and influence. Thank you.